The function of the forearm is to flex and extend the wrist and hand. Like the calves, the forearms are difficult muscles to build. But also like the calves, if they're exercised correctly, anyone can expect to make substantial gains in forearm strength and size. A limiting factor, again, like the calves, in forearm development is the comparative length of muscle and tendon. The longer the tendon, the shorter the muscle belly, lessening the potential for forearm muscle mass.
The palmar muscles at the underside of the forearm flex, abduct, and pronate the hand. The dorsal muscles located on the top of the forearm extend, adduct, and supinate the hand.
The forearm workout has only two basic movements, the wrist curl and the reverse wrist curl. Now the wrist curl involves curling the palm of the hand up toward the wrist, and the reverse wrist curl in which you curl the back of your hand toward the wrist. Your forearm training technique should be done much like that for calves and abdominals. You employ slow movements with a full range of motion and with a pronounced and sustained peak contraction at the top. Hold the muscle in a position of full contraction a moment before letting the weight down in a slow, controlled motion. Forearms should be worked with relatively high reps, around 12 to 15. Remember to use a weight light enough to allow your repetition to be performed in a full range of motion. You'll know you're getting a good forearm workout when you begin to experience a lactic acid buildup or a good burn at the end of a set.
Forearms, like calves, are relatively difficult to develop unless you are genetically gifted with highly responsive forearm muscles. Part of the equation is the actual length of the muscle belly. If you have short forearm muscle and relatively long tendon attachments, achieving really massive forearms can be highly demanding. The key to effective forearm training is to isolate the forearm muscles as much as possible. Wrist curls develop the forearm flexors. To do wrist curls effectively, keep your forearms flat on the bench so that only your wrists move. Slowly bend your wrists, keeping the movement slow, deliberate, and concentrated. Lower the bar as far as possible, pause at the bottom, then curl your wrists up as far as you can, feeling the forearm muscles fully contract at the top.
If you want good arms, not just good biceps and triceps, you gotta train your forearms. Everybody wants to see the forearms. It makes a nice, complete arm.
Reverse wrist curls work the forearm extensor muscles. To stabilize your forearms, place them across a preacher bench, palms facing downward, or kneel down and place them across a flat bench. Again, the key is to isolate these muscles as much as possible. Don't use such a heavy weight that you have to use your biceps to help curl the weight up. The forearm extensor muscles are considerably weaker than the flexors, so you'll find you're using a lot less weight with reverse wrist curls than with wrist curls. This exercise is the direct reverse of wrist curls. Using a slow, deliberate movement, bend the wrists and lower the bar down as far as possible. Pause at the bottom, then curl the back of the hand up as far as you can. Feel a concentrated, continuous tension throughout the movement. Quick and jerky movements are not recommended. At the top, go for a full peak contraction to put maximum intensity into the reverse wrist curl movement. Behind the back curls are a variation of wrist curls for the flexor muscles of the forearm. With this movement, you don't get the same feeling of full range of motion, continuous tension, that you do with wrist curls. But because you're holding the bar at arm's length behind you, you do achieve a great deal of forearm isolation. And a lot of bodybuilders like that feeling of being able to achieve an even more forceful peak contraction of the forearm muscles. Doing wrist curls with dumbbells allows you to work each forearm on its own, so that if one side is weaker or smaller than the other, it can be trained in isolation and forced to work up to its maximum potential. Because your wrist is not locked into one angle of attack, as it is when you're holding onto a barbell, you can pronate or supinate your hand slightly during the lift, which allows you to train at whatever angle feels the best and most reduces any unwanted stress on the wrist. However, unlike doing this movement with your forearms firmly against a bench, it takes a lot more effort to do the exercise strictly. Therefore, you need to concentrate as fully as possible on form, control, technique, full range of motion, and achieving the maximum possible peak contraction at the top of the movement. Reverse barbell curls is an exercise that works the extensor muscles of the forearm, along with involving a number of muscles that tie in the upper arm and forearm, such as the brachialis and the brachioradialis. Reverse barbell curls should be done very strictly, with moderately light weight. Heavier exercises using this same movement, traditional power cleans for example, put an awful lot of stress on the forearms and elbows and can easily lead to injury. Instead, lift and lower the bar in a smooth, controlled manner. Flex your wrist up and back as you lift, if you feel the need for additional intensity. Concentrate on feeling a constant, continuous tension on the muscles during both the concentric and eccentric parts of this exercise. Forearm routine number 1. Barbell wrist curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. Reverse wrist curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. Behind the back wrist curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. Forearm routine number 2. Dumbbell preacher wrist curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. Barbell reverse curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps. Behind the back wrist curls. 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps.
Pay special attention to what the champions told you about calves and forearms development. Remember, nothing sets off a strong, muscular body but a tight, taut, muscular waistline. Because if you do not have a strong, muscular, tight waistline, no matter what you do, you'll never look fit and strong. Power exercises is your next step in order to add more mass, more size to your body. There isn't a single bodybuilder, professional or amateur, who has developed a strong, rugged, powerful body without utilizing power exercises.
I work every body part as hard as the next body part because I believe that you're only as strong as your weakest body part.
You can get to the top. Just don't listen to what any negative people have to say to you. You know what you have to do. Now just go ahead and do it.
The motivation has to come from within. I can sit here and I can say, you know, honey, you're 5 pounds overweight, you're 10 pounds overweight. You should really start thinking about your health and about your look and about your heart and your lungs and about all that stuff. But you won't ever make a change in your diet, in your training regimen, in the way you feel about yourself until you in your own heart want to make that change.
You gotta find out what works best for you. For myself, I found out that just being good wasn't enough. You know, I found out that by doing a little meant I had to do a little bit more, and too much was never enough.
When you give your body what it's hungry for, it somehow responds in such a way, and it rewards you in such a way that you have such a great-looking body that you wonder why you did weight training in the first place.
I don't understand how a woman couldn't want to improve themselves physically. I think all women want that.
You know, you don't need to go to the extremes that somebody like myself would go to. Probably, you know, 45 minutes 3 times a week would be enough. The average person who just wants to improve their fitness and their appearance.
The shapier I get, the more compliments I do get. Even though I'm more muscular than the average woman, it's the shape that's important, not so much the size.
You have to pick your rear end up off that couch or whatever you're doing, sitting there watching TV, eating pizza, whatever it is, and get up and do it.
That's the reason I'm into bodybuilding, because it gives me confidence and independence, and it makes me feel strong. I feel like I can conquer the world.
Bodybuilding in general is a great overall form of physical education. I myself, as a professional, took me a long time to achieve what I wanted to achieve. I mean, not everybody who starts bodybuilding is going to be a professional. It's a very difficult sport, takes a lot of time. But you can, through bodybuilding, change your body to what you specifically want it to be.
Training, make it work, make it happen, it'll pay off in the long run.
Forget that television. Work out.
Bodybuilding is really a kind of sculpture, and anyone who thinks it's only about building big muscles just doesn't get it.
Now that you've done your basic exercises and understand the split system and the different exercises to develop your body parts, you're now ready for power exercises. Because it's the power exercises that builds the ultimate of mass and power into your body.
Without a doubt, bodybuilders produce some of the most striking physiques on the planet. They create a shape and proportion that is, at least by the aesthetics of physique competition, the most beautiful in human history. When they are in contest shape, nobody else on earth displays such definition, muscle separation, or vascularity. A top-level bodybuilder in contest condition looks like nothing less than a living anatomy chart. Qualities such as muscularity, shape, definition, and proportion are really the end products of a long process of training and diet. They represent the final product, and none of these attributes would be possible without a sufficient amount of the raw material of the whole enterprise, muscle. To succeed in the sport, a bodybuilder first has to build a solid, thick, fundamental structure of dense muscle mass.
Bodybuilders are obviously concerned with training for detail. Detail being cuts, definition, muscular symmetry, their proportion. That's what the judges are looking for on stage. But before you can train for detail, you gotta train for size to get big, massive muscles.
Of course, the necessity to build a foundation of muscle doesn't just apply to would-be bodybuilding champions. Anyone wanting to build, shape, and develop his or her body with weight training for health, for athletics, or just trying to look and feel better is faced with the same challenge, building muscle mass. Most types of weight training, pioneered and developed by bodybuilders over the past several decades, do build muscle. But building the maximum amount of mass and strength possible requires a very specific approach to progressive resistance training and the application of certain Weider training principles more than others.
There is a specific type of training just for this. While there are Weider principles for quality and definition work, there are also Weider principles for getting big, massive muscles.
In this tape, we will describe the most effective and efficient ways of training for mass and strength, and examine which Weider principles are most helpful in achieving these goals. We will answer such questions as, what exercises are best for mass training? How much weight do you need to build maximum size? What kind of reps and sets program should you follow? How often should you train? How quickly? How much rest and recuperation do you need? What special training principles should you employ? And what kind of diet is best for getting big and strong? Of course, the overall volume of a muscle is affected by a number of factors. Mitochondrial mass, for example, the energy factories within a muscle cell, glycogenation, the amount of carbohydrates stored in the cell, and blood supply. But the most important structure that contributes to muscle size and strength, particularly as far as bodybuilders are concerned, is muscle fiber. You produce the most massive and strongest muscle possible by hypertrophying the muscle fiber, that is, making it bigger and stronger. You accomplish this by following the proper program of progressive resistance weight training and using the appropriate training principles to build maximum mass. And the most basic of these is training with heavy weight.
You have to have some muscle to work with before you start finishing it off. If you don't have the mass, there's nothing to finish. Then you're wasting time doing a lot of finishing movements when you don't have the muscle to finish off.
I still think I would be influenced to work reasonably heavy.
You can go for the burn all you want and you will not get results.
I agree with you that the heavier weights is where it's at as far as putting on the mass.
You really have to train for mass by training with heavy weights to interject and stimulate the muscles into responding.
They need to develop the muscle mass in order to get it, to have enough mass to file down later on for a competition. And the only way to get that mass is to use heavy power training.
If you would normally come in every week and do 305 on the bench, once a month you should come in and go up to at least 405. And the same thing go for the back and the shoulders, as well as the legs and every other body part.
When I'm training for mass during the week, I like to take the first portion of the week and train heavy movements early in the week, and then by the time I get to the ending of the week, those movements lighten up because your energy level dips. So therefore, trying to get the most out of my training is in the mass building process is in the first portion of the week, the first 3 days.
So delts, 1 week, you go heavy. Same thing applies for the back, same thing applies for the chest, and the same thing applies for the thighs. So once a week is more than enough.
The weight must be heavy enough to stimulate the muscle, but not too heavy that it hurts your muscle.
Only do what your mind and your body can handle. Don't do more.
Bodybuilders need to train with heavy weights. Women bodybuilders as well as men. A muscle fiber is a muscle fiber. And if women bodybuilders, or women training for health, fitness, and shape for that matter, don't train with substantial amounts of weight, they simply won't see the kinds of results they're working so hard for.
Power training is especially important for women bodybuilders because they come to the gym, they're not used to handling heavy weights, they've been told all their lives, don't touch that, it's too heavy, you can't train, you're going to get muscle bound. Well, their bodies work just the same as a man's body. It responds to the same type of training as a man's body. They need to develop the muscle mass in order to get it, to have enough mass to file down later on for a competition. And the only way to get that mass is to use heavy power training.
I found that it was quite easy to put the size on as long as I stayed fairly heavy and lower reps. And until they reach the potential that they want to be at, or should I say get to the size that they want to be at, then they can lighten up their reps and their weights and stick to higher reps.
What a lot of women don't realize is that to get results, sometimes, somewhere in their training career, they must train for mass. And in order to do that, they have to really bite the bullet and train heavy to stimulate the muscle into growth. I know that a lot of women listening to me are probably going to say, oh my gosh, I don't want to look like a weightlifter or a, East German swimmer or whatever image they have about over-muscled women. What they don't realize is when you talk about toning, when you talk about firm and tight bodies, you're talking about nothing more than muscle mass. And I think every woman alive wants a tight, firm body.
A woman in bodybuilding definitely needs a certain amount of muscle. She needs to define it. Without the muscle, she has nothing to define.
You can go for the burn all you want and you will not get results. You will get burn and lactic acid buildup, and I've known lots of women who have burned their way through aerobics videos and they get nothing but burnt out muscles. That does nothing for shape.
The athletes who lift the heaviest weight are weightlifters. That's the point of their sport. Bodybuilders are not weightlifters, but when it comes to building mass and strength, these two types of athletes have a lot in common.
I'm a competitive powerlifter. I'm only concerned with how much weight I can lift. I don't have to worry on how I'm going to look on stage. But the Weider principles that I use in my power training can also be used by bodybuilders who are trying to get as big and massive as possible.
How heavy do you need to train? Bodybuilding is not weightlifting, so how much weight you use is less important than how you feel working with a given weight and how training with it affects your body. In general, you choose a weight in bodybuilding that allows you to do a specific kind of set. For mass training, this is generally a weight that allows you to do 6 to 8 reps in each set. If you can do too many more reps than this, the weight is too light to allow you to build maximum mass and strength. If you fail before you reach the 6th rep, the weight you're using is too heavy. Training heavy is important for building mass, but what kind of training equipment you use is also extremely important. For the most part, bodybuilders intent on building maximum mass and strength should rely as much as possible on free weights, barbells and dumbbells. The human body has evolved over millions of years to deal with the force of gravity, to lift, carry, and move things that have weight. When you lift a barbell or dumbbell, your body has to stabilize the weight against gravity. Secondary muscles, ligaments, and joints all come into play. The electrical activity in the entire nervous system that results when you do this is a clear sign of how much attention the body pays to something that has weight, as opposed to something that simply offers resistance, such as a machine in which you push back and forth along a track or rotate a cam.
Free weight is the best form of training because you can utilize machines. I believe machines like 20% of bodybuilding, 15%. The advantage about free weight, you have a greater freedom, range of motion. You control the weight. It works out the muscles. You're not going one direction. You have other muscles coming to play. And the fact is that enables you to stretch more, work out more, and keep the tension. When you use the machines, you go one direction, and the machine actually helps build the exercise for you, with you. With free weight, it's 100% of yourself.
I was brought up in the old school of bodybuilding where the free weights are the way you gain size. I myself enjoy being big. I like being muscular, and I don't think I could ever achieve it through using machines. You know, you've seen Arnold back in the days when he started, all free weights, and those guys they were big, muscular men.
I think that if you want to build mass, you use the barbells. I'm the old timer believing in barbells and dumbbell presses to build the mass.
I don't think you can build muscle size through machines. This is only my opinion. Other people disagree.
I would use, say, the machine presses if I want to do something like a superset, even get a little bit more creative, doing a superset of, say, side laterals, cables supersetted with, say, a machine press. And I can get more isolation in that delt, but it's more of like a shaping exercise and more of a finishing exercise that would do right before, getting ready for a contest.
But I do think that you can get a much nicer, toner-looking physique through machines.
How well you're able to build mass is also a matter of what kind of exercises you do. For the most part, the best mass-building movements are two-joint exercises. That is, ones that involve the movement of two joints, such as presses, rows, leg presses, and squats, as opposed to isolation exercises such as curls, extensions, or laterals in which movement takes place only at one joint. Two-joint exercises involve more different muscles, which is ideal for mass training. They also give you a mechanical leverage advantage, which means you can handle more weight and give your muscles that much harder a workout.
Daily training for mass will only center around the movements that I use, which will be basically power movements. Any two-handed or two-footed movements that are designed to give me the most power in any type of exercise that I choose. You want to use exercises that's going to be most effective for you. You want to use basic movements such as power clean movements. You want to use all your push-pull basic movements, presses, overhead, squatting to build overall body mass.
And for the back, it would be T-bar rowing.
For your back, bend over T-bar, lat thickness building movements. Leg pressing, for example, is my favorite for the leg building.
Of course, training heavy with free weights doesn't mean you forget everything you know about technique, how muscles work, and what angles to work them to get the best results.
You're working a rear or behind the neck press will bring your arms more back so that you can hit slightly on the side delt as also the front delt, but it is a mass exercise. When you're doing front presses or military presses, you're working more on just your front head of your delts when you're working out. Then when you get to use dumbbells, you get more freedom of motion to work, each arm individually, plus you can rotate the arms in different ways. We can get a different feel on the deltoid, working the side and also the front.
Cutting down on your rest between sets, doing more in the same or less time, and adding additional sets and reps to your workout are all ways of increasing training intensity, but they don't apply when it comes to mass training. To build mass, you have to lift heavy weights. To lift heavy, you need to be as strong as possible, and there are several ways to ensure you're as fresh and strong as possible whenever you do a mass building set. Do your heavy mass training sets at the beginning of your workout. Get plenty of rest between heavy sets, at least 1 minute, although more than 3 minutes will not create added recuperation. Schedule your heavy workouts at the beginning of your training cycle. When you're doing a lot of heavy training, take extra days off if you feel you haven't totally recovered.
In power-type training, rest and recuperation are very important. Rest between sets and rest between workouts. Without enough rest between sets, you're going to risk getting sloppy with your movements. You're going to be a little bit weak on your next set, and you risk injury that way. Without enough rest between workouts, you're basically not going to have enough time to recover. The more intense you train in this power-type training, the more recuperation. You have two variables. You have training and you have recuperation or rest. If you increase one, you have to increase the other. One doesn't go without the other.
Keep in mind, you stimulate growth when you train, but actual growth takes place during the period of recuperation following training. If your sets are intense enough, extending your rest time between workouts can often increase growth. So don't be in too much of a hurry to get back onto the bench or back into the gym when you're training for size and strength.
But remember, more than 3 minutes rest is a waste of time, since by then you'll get all the recovery possible during that workout. You also need to extend your rest time between heavy workouts, either by adding extra rest days or by cycling training. That is, scheduling lighter workouts in between heavy training days.
So at least once a week, you should do at least one workout that's just for mass. You don't want to do it all the time because then it becomes very hard on the joints.
They can't take it. Yeah, power training is great, but you cannot do it all the time. You have to cycle your training. You have to be able to give your body time to relax. You can't be stressing your joints. Power training is extremely stressful on the joints of your body and on the connective tissue. So you have to be able to step back and train a little more relaxed and a little more conventional in between. Say you do 6 or 8 week cycles of each, and this works out fine. It gives your body time to recover, gives your joints time to recover, and you don't have the risk of injury.
Bodybuilding training is done using a full range of motion, going from full extension of the muscles to full contraction. However, when you work a muscle through a full range of motion, you don't work more muscle fibers, you simply work the same muscle fibers more often. This involves endurance, and endurance has nothing to do with mass and power training. Besides, you put yourself in a position of leverage disadvantage at the extreme range of motion in many exercises, which means you can handle less weight. Also, stretching too far when working with heavy weights can increase the risk of injury. So for best results when you're training for mass and strength, train through an adequate range of motion. But don't worry about stretching too far at the bottom or locking out too much at the top. Muscle tissue is composed of muscle fibers, and there are 2 basic different kinds of fiber types. White fast-twitch fiber, which is capable of a limited number of very fast and powerful contractions, and red slow-twitch fiber, which is not as powerful, but can continue to contract for high numbers of repetitions. When you train for strength and power, you tend to recruit white fiber, which is about 22% larger than red fiber. Endurance workouts, on the other hand, any kind of exercise which involves sustained activity over a long period of time, relies more heavily on the action of red fiber. Therefore, the most effective kinds of mass training are usually those which are designed to develop the maximum amount of white fiber.
There are 2 basic types of muscle fibers we see: the white fast-twitch fibers, which are for ballistic quick motions, and then we have the red slow twitch, which has a lot of hemoglobin in it and is more for endurance competition. Sometimes you have a combination or a mixing of both of these, and different muscle groups have different degrees or different ratios of red as well as white fibers. And it depends on the type of body prototype the individual was born with, as well as the type of training that they are performing on a regular basis.
You mentioned something about white fibers. Is there a difference between white and red muscle fibers?
Yes, there is a big difference. White muscle fiber is generally considered for speed. That's what will give you your mass. Red muscle fiber is usually for endurance type exercises, like if you do a real long set or for a marathon runner. Now, white muscle fiber is about 20% larger than red muscle fiber. So if you can recruit more white muscle fiber in your workout, you will definitely get more mass in it.
When you train white fiber properly, you generally are involving red fiber as well. However, the opposite is not true.
No, the opposite is definitely not true. Long, slow sets or time-intensive training where you don't give your muscles much time to recover are great for training red fiber, but only movements that are explosive, where speed is a factor and where the anaerobic fiber is given time to rest and recuperate, are guaranteed to get the maximum response from white fast-twitch fiber. There is a kind of weight training that is designed to do all of the above. It's based on the Weider speed principle, and it's called compensatory acceleration.
An excellent mass building technique is taking the weight and instead of under a slow and controlled movement, using what we call compensatory acceleration, and that's using the weight a little bit faster. Now, usually this is done in a power type workout in the 6 to 8 repetition range. What moving the weight faster is going to do is going to call in more of the white muscle fibers. And also you're going to want to keep a continuous overload on the muscles and also keep a great deal of leverage. In other words, 2-jointed movements, such as pressing movements for the chest, pressing movements for the thighs, this sort of thing.
Mike, show me how you normally do these dumbbell presses.
Sure. I try to keep my form nice and strict, never letting the weight get out of control. Do as many reps as I can without losing that control of the weight.
Strict form is very important, but there's also a way to turn this into a super mass building exercise by using the Weider principle of acceleration. Why don't we go ahead and try it?
Let's do it.
Control it on the way down and accelerate all the way up to the top. There you go. From the bottom all the way to the top. Don't slow down. Remember, we want to recruit all the white muscle fiber we possibly can. See how big we can get you. Squeeze. There you go. Drive. Nothing but shoulders. Accelerate. Good. Squeeze. One more. Speed. Good. How'd that feel?
Incredible. It felt like there was 20 or 30 more pounds in the bar.
It's actually the same weight you used in the first place.
You know, I noticed I got more of a pop out of that set, too.
You worked a lot harder.
Incredible.
The explosive type training I'm talking about as far as for putting on size is different than powerlifting in that you're doing controlled sets. You're not just going for a max amount of weight for a single repetition or even doing, sets of 4 just to build strength. You're building muscle too, so you're doing controlled movements but in an explosive fashion. It's not just pure powerlifting, just trying to move the weight. You're still filling the weight, but you're training as heavy and explosive as possible with maintaining control. It's a controlled explosion from the bottom, and you follow through with it all the way. It's constant acceleration. You want to think of accelerating the weight through the movement instead of just moving the weight. You want to be constantly trying to accelerate, push harder as you're going up. And this is the way it puts a lot of stress on the muscle, and you get a lot of good results from it.
Hey, this is lightweight for you, isn't it?
Actually is, but it's enough weight just to show you the Weider acceleration principle.
Squatting. What's your heaviest squat, anyways?
964.
964, you got this. This is ice cream for you. Let's go.
Watch how I accelerate from the bottom.
All legs, huh? Nice and strict, too.
Yeah, that's why you pause a little bit.
Pausing at the bottom. No problem. Easy. You're in. I can see that was really tough for you. Ice cream, baby, ice cream.
Supposedly one of the wonders of modern exercise machines is their ability to give you variable leverage. Well, actually, compensatory acceleration, which is the basis of power training, also gives you variable leverage. It works this way. When you're going through a movement, you have, at different points, at a leverage advantage or a leverage disadvantage. That is, you're stronger in some places because of mechanical advantage and you're weaker in others. Now, if you're accelerating the weight as much as you can, if you're driving the weight up ballistically, what happens is, at the parts of the movement in which you're stronger, you drive the weight faster, which makes it heavier. Now, at the parts where you're not as strong, where you're weaker, then the weight is lighter. So what you've done is you've created a situation in which, when you're weaker, the weight is lighter. When you're stronger, the weight is heavier. For instance, in a bench press, as you get the bar down to your chest, then you're weaker. So as you accelerate up, you can't push it as fast. The bar at that point is lighter. But as you start to straighten out your arms and you get a mechanical advantage, well, at that point, the bar becomes heavier. You're stronger, the bar is heavier. Well, that's variable leverage. You don't need a complicated exercise machine to do that. You can do it with free weights and compensatory acceleration.
Training to failure is another familiar training principle to most bodybuilders. It means continuing with any given set until you can't squeeze out any more reps with the weight you're using without stopping to rest. But this doesn't work with acceleration training. Acceleration training is designed to generate power. And what does this exactly mean? Power is different from strength. Strength is your ability to lift a weight a given distance. But in power, time comes into play. Power is a measure of the weight times the distance, divided by the time. That is, the faster you lift it, the more power you generate.
We racked it because you weren't accelerating more, which means you weren't generating enough power. When you can't generate enough power, it's not good for mass training.
I understand that. I felt that when I was coming towards the end, the 8th rep.
So for acceleration training, you don't train to failure, you train to the failure of power. That is, you keep going until you can't accelerate the weight anymore. When power fails, stop. Take a rest for a minute or more. Then come back for another acceleration set.
Again, what we're doing is working that white muscle fiber. In order to do that, we have to accelerate from the bottom of the movement all the way up to the top. Controlling on the way down, exploding on the way up, squeezing those lats. Remember, 6 to 8 reps to the failure of power.
I would suggest you exercise caution with fast ballistic movements. Again, when you move quickly, it's now an inertial factor. You have weight moving at a very rapid speed.
So this type of training just hits the white muscle fibers of the body in order for you to gain more mass?
It hits a lot more white muscle fiber than red muscle fiber. You obviously do it in your training, but if you can consciously know that you are doing it, you can do it all the time.
And I still have the feeling that doing this type of exercise, I'll be throwing the weight around, doing cheating.
Oh, not at all. You're actually controlling the weight more than you normally would. You're concentrating with your mind more.
Training explosively is not cheating, and it's not totally disorienting yourself from the movement. You still want to have that mind-muscle link, and you still want to feel the movement through the range, but you're going to do it explosively.
Remember, endurance is not a factor. Take your time and generate maximum intensity in each set. Make sure you rest between sets, and don't overtrain by trying to do too much heavy training in the same workout. And finally, when making the transition from heavy training to quality training in an eclectic workout, employ all of the Weider quality training principles listed in tape 9, such as full range of motion, peak contraction, etc.
Since training heavy helps build muscle, all things considered, the heavier you're able to train and still manage to do 6 or 8 reps, the more muscle mass you can build. One intensity training principle that helps you to do this is forced reps, a technique in which your training partner helps you to lift a weight just a little too heavy for you, or to force out more reps in a set than you could do on your own.
Say your bench press is 250 pounds. If you want to increase your bench press, basically you would do, say you do 8 reps with 250. We would strip the weight. After you do one set, do 225 and 200. The next time you handle 260 or 270 because the fourth rep you have someone there to spot you. You force yourself to increase the rep. Like say if you do 8 reps, you can't do 2 more. You have a training partner to help you for a fourth rep. The next time you can handle the same weight and do 10 repetitions. Then the next workout you handle more weight. So with the fourth rep technique enables you to be stronger and stronger.
You do have to eat to grow. However, many bodybuilders training to get huge over the years have chosen to satisfy their nutritional needs simply by eating a lot.
So what's basic for me is beef, ketchup, and Coca-Cola.
Unfortunately, taking in calories indiscriminately like this may give your body what it needs to build muscle, but taking in all those excess calories is also likely to make you fat, which means dieting for definition becomes that much more difficult. Heavy training creates the demand for nutrients in the body. If you want to get big and strong, you have to supply whatever nutrients the body needs and deliver them when the body is most ready to absorb them. Tape 8 of the Weider system covers diet and nutrition at great length, but here is a summary of what, when, and how much to eat to give your body what it needs to build maximum mass. Eat at least 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight on days when you're doing intense training. Eat 5 or 6 smaller meals during the day rather than 2 or 3 larger meals. Take in both protein and carbs immediately after any intense workout. Fat intake should be kept low to moderate in your diet. Drink plenty of water to allow your metabolism to function most efficiently.
You need to eat an adequate diet with supplements. It is especially important to eat protein during the window of opportunity, before, during, and after your workout.
When I'm training for mass, I like to eat a lot of variations of food, primarily beef. 90% beef, and whatever goes with it will have beef on top of it.
When I'm mass training, I do up my carbs. Unlike when I'm contest training, I drop my carbs and up my protein. I do just the opposite when I'm mass training.
Train with heavy weights. Your muscles will not grow unless you overload them with progressively heavy poundage. Choose a weight that allows you to do sets of 6 to 8 reps. Rely on free weights, barbells, and dumbbells for your mass and strength building workouts. Build mass using 2-joint compound exercises such as presses, rows, deadlifts, squats, and leg presses. Do your mass training at the beginning of your workouts or beginning of your training cycle when you're the strongest and the most rested. Rest at least 1 minute between heavy sets, but no more than 3 minutes. Take extra days off when necessary to allow for complete recuperation when you're doing heavy mass training. Cycle your training, alternating heavy and light training workouts or groups of workouts. Use the compensatory acceleration principle to develop the maximum of white fiber with ballistic movements. Train to the failure of power, your ability to accelerate a weight rather than to the point where you can't move the weight at all. Handle heavier weights doing forced reps with the help of a training partner. To develop as much mass and strength as possible, eat at least 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight on heavy training days, and eat a sufficient number of calories to allow your body to grow. Remember, strict dieting and maximum muscle gains don't mix.
Now that you know everything you have to know about power training and building mass and power, you must master nutrition, because nutrition is what's going to turn your mass training and power training into muscularity, shaping, and muscularizing and hardening your body.
You don't have to begin weight training at 15, 16, 20. You could begin weight training at 70, because the important thing, it makes you feel good about yourself.
Bodybuilding can have a positive effect on anybody's life. It can help you lose weight and give you more confidence.
You don't have to be a champion, you know, to be involved in bodybuilding. It's the thrill of watching your body change and just loving it, you know.
Nutrition. Boy, it's a simple word, but one of the most important words in bodybuilding. Without an understanding of nutrition, you'll never be able to control your weight, your shape of your muscles, and how you look. So pay careful attention to what the bodybuilders tell you. Listen carefully to what the champions tell you, because without that knowledge, you'll never look your best.
Probably the most distinctive thing about the in-shape competitive bodybuilding physique, even more than the incredible amount of well-developed, shapely, and proportional muscle, is the extreme definition that bodybuilding stars are able to achieve. When a contest-ready bodybuilder poses, he or she ends up looking like an anatomy chart. every muscle in the body clearly defined. You see striations in places you didn't even know people had muscles. If you're not used to seeing physiques in this kind of shape, the result can be pretty shocking. When you hear people talking about how unnatural bodybuilders look, or women looking pained and exclaiming, "How gross," you can bet they aren't reacting to the big muscles. It's all that ripped to shreds definition. However, most people don't realize that this isn't a normal condition for most bodybuilders. They don't look like this most of the time. Instead, this in-shape condition is something that's very difficult to achieve, a result of intense training and the most rigorous program of dieting imaginable, aimed at creating a physique that combines the maximum amount of muscle mass and the minimum amount of body fat at the same time. To achieve this, bodybuilders have had to learn more about dieting for fat loss than almost anyone else in the world. In fact, bodybuilders are the most successful dieters on the face of the planet. Most diets don't work for most people, but bodybuilders are virtually 100% successful in their diets, judged by any normal standard. They're not only able to lose the amount of fat they need to lose, but they do this on a very strict and predictable timetable, so that they end up totally ripped and in incredibly defined condition just in time for the contest. If anyone has any further doubts that bodybuilders know something about dieting that other people don't, just look at what's been happening in the sport of bodybuilding for women. Most women struggle to get down below 30% relative body fat, but women physique competitors regularly achieve such extreme states of lean muscularity that it's clear we're going to have to re-examine our assumptions about the physical potential of the human female. Women, it now seems, are capable of getting a lot stronger, leaner, and more muscular than we've ever given them credit for.
Your training, you can learn how to do in a few years, no problem, figure that out. But the diet, you know, everyone's an individual and has a different body and will respond differently to different foods. So it's really important that you spend time with your diet and taking notes on everything.
It doesn't take a special diet to gain muscle. Just train hard and eat right. The trick is gaining muscle and losing body fat at the same time.
Of course, when you say the word diet, everyone automatically assumes you're talking about dieting to lose fat. But diet should really include all aspects of how and what you eat, for all sorts of purposes. Eating for energy to help you exercise, to help you build muscle, and for those individuals who feel they are too skinny rather than too fat, to gain shapely, proportionate, lean body mass. For example, bodybuilders don't only have to lower their body fat, they have to build the kind of quality muscle that results in a competitive physique. And they have to maintain as much of that muscle as possible, even while dieting for fat loss. This means paying a lot of attention to nutrition, what they eat, rather than just how much they eat. So a complete program of bodybuilding diet has to take all of these different factors into consideration in order to be successful. Okay, given that bodybuilders are the masters of dieting to control body composition, exactly how do they go about it? What kind of a program is it that bodybuilders have discovered that gives them such incredible results? First of all, bodybuilders have a very simple and practical way of dealing with food. The human metabolism is very complex, and the body utilizes nutrients in a wide variety of highly complicated ways. But bodybuilders aren't interested in all of this. They have certain goals they want to achieve. They want to know how to achieve them. They don't want to earn degrees in nutrition. They just want results. With this in mind, bodybuilders have gotten great results treating food in the following oversimplified but very practical way. Protein provides the raw material for muscle building. Fat has too much concentrated food energy and needs to be minimized. Carbohydrate is fuel.
I always keep the fat intake extremely low, probably below 5% coming into a competition. In the off-season, sometimes as high as 10%. And then about 60% carbohydrate year-round and the balance in protein.
I'd say my protein percent in the off-season, say 10% fat, proteins around 40, and then 30 would be my carbs.
You have to always think that way. What can that food do for me? Protein gives me muscle, and carbohydrates gives me energy. Pasta gives you energy, it's good for training.
A typical bodybuilder's diet is a diet consisting of high protein, low fat. You know, they're looking for actually no fat and high protein. With, you know, it's a lot of egg whites, it's a lot of chicken breast, very lean steak occasionally. Some guys don't have it. Some good fish, you know, generally some white flesh fish such as fillet of sole or orange roughy is they choose to be one of their favorite fishes. And they're looking, you know, for vegetables, for their vitamins, but, you know, everything's steamed or cooked without absolutely no butter or no oil.
The idea that protein is important to building muscle is hardly a new one, although you'd be surprised how long it's taken science and research medicine to verify this fact. Of course, protein has any number of uses in the body besides building muscle, but trial and error experience over the past 5 decades has taught bodybuilders that you need a lot of extra protein when you do intense training, or you won't get maximum results. Actually, it isn't just bodybuilders and other athletes for whom strength and muscle mass are important who need this extra protein. Nowadays, it's been shown that almost all kinds of intense physical effort increase the body's requirement for protein. So you're just as likely to see a marathon runner or a tennis player taking a protein supplement as a bodybuilder.
So how much protein do you need? Individual requirements may vary, but here's a rule of thumb.
You need 1 gram of protein for each pound of body weight on those days in which you are doing heavy workouts. And you need 1 gram of protein for every kilogram, that's 2.2 pounds of body weight, on days when you aren't exercising or aren't exercising intensely.
There you go. Thanks, Matt. This need for protein, by the way, has nothing to do with whether or not you're trying to lose body fat. In the process of losing body fat, you're going to lose muscle tissue. So you should always keep your protein intake high to help rebuild the intracellular muscle cells within the body.
The key with you or with anybody to grow and get big and stay there is to continuously have protein in the body. In other words, you cannot eat too much protein at one time and go too many hours with nothing. The protein takes 2 to 4 hours to digest. Then it's stored in the muscles as glycogen. If you now don't eat for 8 hours, it was 4 hours bringing the glycogen into the muscle, and the next 4 hours taking it away. So the muscle is not stable. So if you eat again, then you prevent the depletion.
Typical proteins that bodybuilders eat are egg whites, steak, chicken breast, fish, cooked without any fat or oil.
The body can only utilize 50 to 70 grams of protein per time, and no more. That means if you eat one steak that's 50, 60 grams of protein, is better than eating 2 steaks, which is 120 grams. Because the body will take the extra protein and store it as fat.
Fats, or oils, which are basically fats that are liquid at room temperature, are the most calorically dense of the 3 basic macronutrients. Protein and carbohydrate contain 4 calories per gram, while fat has 9 calories per gram. Quite a difference. The human body needs some intake of fat in the diet in order to survive and prosper, but most of us get far more than we need. Since bodybuilders try to get as lean as possible for contests, they've learned to avoid eating fat as much as possible. No fried foods, no dressing on their salads, no butter or sour cream on their baked potatoes.
Even when you're not on a weight loss diet, it makes sense to keep your fat intake as low as you're practically able. So bodybuilders have learned to restrict their fat intake all year long, not just when dieting for contests.
When it comes to nutrition, I think it's important to have the right amount of carbohydrates in your diet, also to have the right amount of protein, because you need your protein to recuperate and build new muscle tissues, which is very important. And you should keep your fat very low because you don't want to have too much calories in your diet.
The most fat is always found in the meat. Remember, meat is 60% fat. Wow. Even when it's lean. In comparison to, let's say, fish, which is only 6% fat and 94% protein. Wow. That's why when you hear people say, what kind of fish I should eat, what fish is lean, don't worry about it. The most fattening fish might have 0.5% more fat than the other fish.
The third food element is carbohydrate. Carbohydrates in its simplest form is sugar. It comes in complex forms such as starches found in potatoes or rice, or in simple forms such as fructose that gives fruit its sweet taste. Again, the body has many uses for carbohydrate, and carbohydrate foods contain all sorts of different nutritional elements. But as far as bodybuilders are concerned, carbs are just energy. We've discussed the fact that your protein intake is fairly well fixed all the time, depending on whether or not you're working out, not whether you're dieting for weight loss. And you should be eating low fat as much as possible. So it stands to reason that if you want to reduce your caloric intake in order to lose body fat, your only recourse is to eat less carbohydrate.
I prefer the complex carbohydrates for bodybuilders, the long-lasting, the long-acting, rather than the simple sugar-type carbohydrates like simple fruits and so on.
If you have fruit, you can eat it right before the training because that is a quick carbohydrate. If you want to train for more hours, then you need carbohydrate that came from like pasta. That's a long-term carbohydrate. You can classify them in 2 types for us, for bodybuilding.
Carbohydrates are whole wheat flour. They like pasta, rice, potatoes.
Diets based on very low carbohydrate intake have been popular in this country for more than 100 years. In fact, when I first got involved in bodybuilding back in the 1970s, that was the fashionable diet. The zero-carb diet was what everybody was on at the time. Now, why do people like this diet? Well, it works this way. When you eat carbohydrate, it becomes stored in the muscles as glycogen. And along with the glycogen, you also store water. Well, glycogen and water have a certain amount of weight to them, so this contributes to the body's overall weight. When you deprive the body of carbohydrate, you lose this glycogen, and you lose the water associated with it. So in the first few days of a carbohydrate deprivation diet, you lose a substantial amount of body weight. Your limbs get smaller. You seem to look more slender. As a matter of fact, one of the byproducts of this diet is also that you tend to lose your appetite, so it makes it somewhat easier to stay on the diet. But of course, you haven't lost any fat at all. You're simply dehydrated. However, there's another mechanism that comes into play when you deprive yourself too much of carbohydrates. You go into a state called ketosis. The state of ketosis is not only not very good for you, but it really doesn't help you to lose weight at all.
The human body needs a minimum of about 60 grams of carbohydrate every day. When glycogen is not available, the body has to go to an alternate emergency system in order to keep the brain and nervous system functioning. Fortunately, there is an alternate fuel source available, and that energy is produced when the body is in the state of ketosis. The The body needs carbs in order to adequately burn fat. Without those carbs available, fat is incompletely burned, creating ketone bodies as a result. And the body begins more and more to metabolize amino acids, protein, in order to obtain energy. It does not, as is commonly assumed, speed up the metabolism of fat. Without sufficient carbs available, it simply isn't capable of doing this. Your appetite does tend to diminish when you're in a state of ketosis, but that's about the only real benefit. Since you can't burn fat efficiently without enough carbohydrate in your diet, this approach doesn't make for a very effective fat loss diet. And you begin to burn up your own lean body tissue at an increasing rate, which not only means you're cannibalizing your own muscles, but other protein structures as well. Heart muscle, to use one scary example.
You also end up with severely reduced energy for your workouts. The body will function on ketone bodies, but it doesn't function nearly as well as it does when it has carbohydrate energy available. Not only that, but your entire nervous system tends to shut down. You get irritable, you experience sleeplessness. In fact, you can get downright stupid. Your mind just doesn't work very well when all it has to fuel it is ketone bodies. So it's obvious that the ketosis diet is not a good one. You lose water and not fat. And then you put yourself in a situation in which it's easy for you to lose muscle, but difficult for you to lose fat. That's not a good idea for anyone. But for a bodybuilder who's trying to build maximum amount of muscle mass, it's simply a disaster.
However, as we've seen, the only way to lose fat while maintaining maximum muscle mass is by reducing your intake of carbohydrate. Therefore, it follows that knowing exactly how low you can go in dropping your carbs as part of a fat reduction diet is a very important element to achieving your goals. So how do you know how far you can go without going into carbohydrate deprivation? Actually, this is easy. There's a test that will tell you, and anyone can do it at home. You can buy a product called Keto Sticks in almost any drugstore. These are test strips that you dip in your urine and which turn from pink to deep purple when ketone bodies are detected. Ketosis dieters use these test sticks to make sure they're in ketosis. But with the Weider system diet, you should use these test strips to make sure you aren't in ketosis. And if you aren't in ketosis, you haven't overly restricted your carbohydrate intake. The rule is this: you can cut back on your carbohydrate as far as you want, as long as you don't go into ketosis. If you do go into ketosis, even just a little bit, you have to immediately increase your carbohydrate intake in order to give your body the carbs it needs to supply energy for exercise and to allow you to burn fat efficiently. Ketosis is the bottom line. You can't restrict your diet any further than this and expect to burn fat well and protect your lean body mass, which are two major goals of the bodybuilding diet. If this isn't enough, if you need to lose weight faster than this diet will allow you to, further restriction of your diet isn't the answer. You have to attack the problem from the other end by burning up more calories through exercise.
Carbohydrate deprivation is a mistake. Without carbohydrates, you have no energy for training. Carbohydrates are also muscle sparing, and without carbohydrates, you won't burn fat properly.
The biggest problem is when you train and when you're preparing for competition to train and everything, if you don't eat carbohydrate and you go really on low carbohydrate, the body tries to make protein, converting it into energy, and it's something that's very hard to do. Protein doesn't give energy. The body has to convert it, or you eat protein. If it doesn't, you go there to the gym and you have no energy. And that is how slowly the body is incapable of making energy for protein. And that's how people go in ketosis, and the energy goes down to zero, and finally like getting dizzy and collapsing.
I myself experienced that training for the 1991 Mr. Olympia. It was my first Olympia, and I wanted to try to look as good as possible, and I cut my carbohydrates down too low. And on 2 occasions I passed out just from not having enough carbohydrates just to power my legs. You know, my body just shut down. And I was off for 5 or 6 seconds both times. And through experience, I know never to go that low again. So with carbohydrates, you want to experiment and gradually come down. And if you ever feel yourself getting to a point where you're dizzy, you break out into a very cold sweat, you're seeing blurred vision, then you know you're going too low. You know, then you're depriving the body of too many carbs. Up your carbohydrates a little bit and just stay safe.
Most diets involve restricting food intake to reduce body weight. But to be really effective, especially for a bodybuilder, a diet needs to be protein sparing. That is, it should allow you to lose body fat while retaining as much lean body mass, muscle, as possible. Because when you lose muscle, you also lose the ability to burn calories effectively.
Most people know that calories are associated with exercise, that when you exercise, you burn up calories. What they don't realize is that the only thing in the body that actually burns up calories is muscle tissue. Muscle is the only thing that burns calories. Fat doesn't burn calories, bone doesn't burn calories. So it stands to reason that all other things being equal, the more muscle mass you have, the more calories you're going to burn up. Well, you see this with some of the larger bodybuilders. Some of the guys are like 250 pounds in contest shape, and they have enormous amounts of muscle mass. So for them, a diet is perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. And they may eat as much as 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 calories a day when they're not dieting in order to maintain their muscle mass. Well, this is very, very unusual. Most bodybuilders, of course, are not that big. Most are 200 pounds or 210 pounds. And these people need to diet on much smaller amounts of calories because the muscle mass that they have simply doesn't burn up any more calories than this during the day. When you get the smaller bodybuilders, the amateurs, when you get some of the women who may only be 150, 140 pounds, this can really be a problem because a diet for them may be as little as 1,200, 1,400, 1,500 calories a day. It's very difficult to get all the protein you need and to get all the nutrients you need in your diet and eat that little every day. So their job is then to try and work out a diet that allows them to eat as little as possible and yet still maintain their muscle mass and maintain their nutrition. But basically, the bigger the muscles that you're able to create when you're training, and this goes for anybody, not just a bodybuilder, the more calories you're going to burn up, and therefore the more you're going to be able to eat without getting fat. And of course, that's a big advantage in that the more you can eat when you're training, the better you're going to feel, the more energy you're going to have, and the less difficult you're going to find dieting to be.
When I'm dieting for a contest, I have about 25 chicken breasts a day. Okay. 25, 27 chicken breasts a day. I come from an Italian family, big eaters. Yeah. I've always had big meals, so it's not like I force the food down. I just enjoy eating, you know?
See, you can get the same results if you will mix more proteins together. For example, meat, chicken, is digested 68% in the body only. That means that 32 is wasted. So out of the 25 chicken breasts, you really, the masses are gaining only 15, 17. You see, if you will eat more fish, fish is digested 78%. You see, is a higher quality protein. The best is eggs. Eggs is digested 88%. Only 12% is wasted. So when you eat 10 eggs, you're getting 9 in the muscles. When you eat 10 breast chickens, or chicken breast, whatever you call them, then you're only getting 6 in the muscle. That's the difference. Wow. You need to mix more different proteins like fish, then meat, then eggs, and then the meat difference. You have chicken, beef, veal, lamb, mix it.
You do need protein to build muscle, but not all foods are equal when it comes to providing that protein. Some, as you've just learned, provide a higher or lower net protein utilization than others. That is, your body can actually use a greater or lesser percentage of the amino acids in that food. Also, many protein foods have very small amounts of certain essential amino acids. And without the right amounts of all the essential aminos, you won't get the complete protein your muscles need.
Another factor which has a lot of influence on how many calories you burn is metabolic rate. Now, we all are born with a certain genetic predisposition to metabolic rate, which is simply just a measure of how many calories you burn up over a period of time. Everyone has a natural basal metabolic rate. Some people have much faster, some people much slower basal metabolic rate. For example, we've all met people who could eat and eat and eat and never gain a pound, while somebody else just has to look at food and they'll get fat. Well, these are examples of somebody with a very fast metabolic rate and someone with a very slow metabolic rate. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. And for us, what we need to do is try and increase our metabolic rate if we want to stay very, very lean while eating enough to build our bodies and to stay fit and strong. So there are two ways, basic ways, that you can speed up your metabolic rate. One is by exercise. When you work out, your resting metabolic rate goes up. That is the measure of how many calories you're burning at any given time. So you speed up your resting metabolic rate by exercise. Bodybuilding, of course, does speed it up somewhat, but bodybuilders like to do a lot of additional aerobic exercise, not because they burn up so many calories while they're actually on the treadmill or on the stationary bicycle. They do burn up some. But then the whole rest of the day, because of this kind of exercise, their resting metabolic rate is going to be elevated. So over the course of 24 hours, over the course of the day, they're going to burn up a lot more calories.
Bodybuilding workouts do burn calories, but not as many as you might expect. Bodybuilding isn't about endurance. It's largely an anaerobic form of exercise. Anaerobic simply means without oxygen. Bodybuilding training involves short, intense bursts of activity where you quickly outrun the oxygen supply to your muscles. At that point, you go into oxygen debt, where you have to stop, rest, and let your circulatory system bring more oxygen to the muscles involved before you can continue with another intense series of muscle contractions. With long, slow endurance forms of exercise, however, the level of intensity is low enough that your body can continue to provide the oxygen necessary to support the creation of energy in the cells for long periods of time. This is very different from the sets and reps scheme used by bodybuilders in the gym to create their very distinctive kind of muscular physique. Aerobic or cardiovascular type exercise is an ideal way of burning up the maximum amount of calories and stimulating your overall metabolic rate. So today's bodybuilders have learned not to diet as hard as they used to, but to eat a little more and burn up any excess calories by means of some kind of aerobic exercise. Competitive bodybuilders can't afford to get up on stage nowadays looking as drawn, depleted, and emaciated as too many would-be champions have allowed themselves to be over the years. After all, what's the use of building a quality physique with years of hard, strict, and disciplined training only to diet away all your gains in an 8 or 10-week period preceding a contest? Starvation diets cause the body to metabolize muscle tissue, and when you lose muscle, you also lose the ability to burn calories, a particularly vicious circle for a serious bodybuilding competitor or for anyone trying to create a lean, muscular physique. Furthermore, nobody could be expected to train with maximum intensity while starving themselves. You need energy to train, energy to recover, and sufficient nutrients in your body to allow your tired muscles to fully recuperate and rebuild themselves between workouts. So there is a limit to how hard you can diet and still protect your hard-won muscle gains. Obviously, once you're dieting as hard as you can, if you want to create an even greater caloric deficit in your body, your only recourse is to turn to additional energy-consuming exercise, which means some kind of aerobic activity in addition to your bodybuilding workouts in the gym. When it comes to burning calories, most forms of aerobic exercise are about equal, whether riding a bicycle, running, or simply going for long walks. The ideal is to elevate your heart rate to a moderate degree and keep it there as long as possible. The ideal amount of additional cardiovascular exercise for a bodybuilder is something like 20 to 40 minutes per session, 1 or 2 sessions a day. So if developing a bodybuilding physique is your goal, remember this motto: to look like a bodybuilder, you have to train like a bodybuilder. With too much cardiovascular exercise, you'll end up with too much of the wrong kind of physical development.
The other thing which influences your metabolic rate is eating food. When you eat food, your metabolic rate goes up. But it doesn't go up the same for every kind of food. For example, anytime you eat fat or you eat carbohydrate, your resting metabolic rate goes up by about 10%, and this is fine. But when you eat protein, your metabolic rate goes up by a full 30%. This is why it's a very good idea to eat at least some protein food with every meal. And if you notice, any time at the end of the meal when you've eaten protein, you'll tend to get hot. When you eat meat, you'll tend to sweat afterwards. And that's a perfect example of the fact that your metabolic rate is elevated. And it's the natural adjustment your body makes to eating food. You eat food, your metabolic rate goes up. And if this is coupled with exercise, that means you can eat more, but your body is not going to turn those calories that you've consumed into body fat.
It may sound like a contradiction, but you have to eat to burn fat and stay lean. If you deprive your body of food, it reacts as it would during a famine. Its survival mechanisms are activated. When there's no food available, your body doesn't want to expend energy. It wants to conserve it. So your metabolic rate slows down dramatically, which makes intense training extremely difficult. To avoid this, bodybuilders need to follow some simple rules of eating. 1. Reduce your calories, but don't starve yourself. Observe the nutritional minimums described later in this tape. 2. Eat a lot of small meals. Once you've determined what your caloric intake for the day is going to be, divide that up into 5 or even 6 meals, spread out over the course of the day. 3. Eat protein with every meal. Again, figure out what your protein intake for the day is going to be, and then divide it up so that you ingest at least some protein with every one of your 5 or 6 meals. And 4, don't eat the same foods every day. Keep nutritional variety in your diet as much as possible.
When I'm training, I eat 6 times every day. Smaller meals, a protein with a carb, always, salads, oatmeal, egg whites, chicken breast, fish, those sorts of things. I do eat pasta and, other junky things once in a while, but that's normal.
5 or 6 meals a day, it's the best way to do it. I think consistency with that type of eating is important. It's like you wouldn't eat 5 meals in one meal. Like, for instance, for breakfast, you wouldn't, like I hear these people say, well, I only had 1 meal today, I did really good. I only had dinner. When in fact, when you do that, your metabolism actually slows down. You'll actually burn more calories and get your body into shape much more effectively by eating more calories throughout the day, because every time you eat a meal, your body has to secrete different enzymes to break down the fats, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and so on. Every time you do that, you're boosting your metabolism. Whereas if you go from, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, your metabolism has a tendency to slow down, and you actually don't even lose weight.
Bodybuilders will start off having oatmeal with egg whites whipped in, and then they'll have some fruit. Then later that afternoon, they'll have chicken breast and maybe whole wheat French toast, then a pancake. Then they'll have a pasta with vegetables. Then further, they'll have grilled seafood, and then fish or chicken.
One of the worst mistakes some bodybuilders make nowadays is overtraining. As they get close to a contest, many physique competitors begin training 5 or 6 days a week, twice a day, and often with 2 intense cardiovascular workouts added to their bodybuilding training. When you're on a schedule like this, it's very difficult to stay anabolic. That is, in a state in which the body continues to build and maintain dense, hard, lean body mass. Overtraining quickly leads to becoming catabolic, where your body metabolizes and cannibalizes your own muscle tissue. The same thing happens when you go into ketosis, or when you don't ingest enough quality protein to support your muscle building workouts. A lot of bodybuilders seem to swear by the philosophies of more is better. Nothing succeeds like excess. or too much is never enough. But developing a bodybuilding physique, whether you're planning on serious competition or just trying to get into the best shape possible, involves a combination of intense effort and judicious restraint. Train hard, eat well, get plenty of rest. A balanced and reasonable approach to getting the most out of your body.
Rest and recuperation are important elements of this equation, as are not overtraining and not dieting too strictly for too long. But along with diet, there's another element of eating that's very important: what you eat. In other words, nutrition.
A lot of people are surprised to find that bodybuilders are not as interested in nutrition, that is, in healthy eating, as you might expect. Primarily, we're concerned with effective eating. That is, by creating a diet that will allow us to build muscle mass and minimize body fat. What the usual bodybuilder diet tends to lack is variety. They tend to eat the same sorts of things day after day: chicken, egg whites, fish, plain baked potatoes and rice, and some vegetables and salads. And then they tend to make up for whatever nutritional deficiencies this type of diet involves by taking large amounts of nutritional supplements. However, a lot of bodybuilders nowadays are coming to realize that one way to increase the effectiveness of their diet is to think in terms of nutritional quality, in addition to simply paying attention to how much protein, carbohydrate, and fat they've included in their daily diet regimens. And how do you do this? Actually, it's not that complicated. You really don't need a nutritionist looking over your shoulder in order to improve the quality of your diet. You simply need to be aware of the certain basic principles involved in eating.
For example, use variety to increase nutritional quality. Different foods contain different nutrients in different amounts, so it doesn't make sense to eat the same diet every day. There are enough different sorts of green, yellow, and other vegetables that you can go days or weeks without eating the same vegetable twice. The same is true for fruit and starches, such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, brown rice, wild rice, and pasta. And eating a wide variety of different foods is not only nutritious, it avoids the boredom that frequently spells disaster when it comes to serious dieting. Eat the highest quality food you can find. All things being equal, fresh is better than frozen. Frozen superior to canned. Processing tends to diminish the nutritional quality of food. Some types of markets feature food that is fresher with fewer preservatives. In addition, those bodybuilders concerned with health as well as physique like to seek out stores that sell organically grown food, free from contamination by pesticides. Much of this, of course, is a matter of personal preference. It's up to you how seriously you wish to pursue the health aspects of eating, but you should at least be aware of what the choices are. And finally, don't destroy nutrition through preparation. In general, broiling meat or steaming vegetables preserves nutritional value better than frying or boiling. Frying tends to add fat, and when you boil food, much of the nutritional value is lost to the water. Microwaving is another good way to cook food without destroying nutrients. If you're into cooking and want to know more about how best to prepare food, there are shelves full of books on the subject in any good health food store. In the past few years, bodybuilders have come to realize how important it is to drink sufficient amounts of water on a daily basis. Water continuously moistens our lungs. It helps us to maintain our internal temperature. Water lubricates our joints. Muscles are about 75% water. Blood is close to 90% water. Without sufficient intake of water, you become dehydrated. Your body begins to retain water to protect itself, and much of this water is stored subcutaneously, which smooths out muscular definition dramatically. Retained water becomes contaminated because your kidneys can't filter out contaminants properly when you're dehydrated. The liver is then called upon to help process these waste products, which interferes with one of its main functions, breaking down body fat. So without sufficient water in your body, you're liable to end up waterlogged, bloated, and obese, which is disastrous for a bodybuilder working for maximum definition. This also leads to problems with sodium. When you're dehydrated, sodium can't be adequately flushed from the body, causing further water retention, and any additional sodium ingested in your diet simply aggravates the problem. For anyone involved in intense exercise, the need for water is at least 8 12-ounce glasses per day. Some bodybuilders drink even more than this, and water in solution doesn't count. You need pure water, not juice, soft drinks, coffee, tea, or some other substitute.
The reason why I, drink water quite a bit during my workouts, you sweat a lot, so you lose a lot of the nutrients and stuff like that just to pretty much replenish the body and keep the muscles full. So I usually go through like anywhere from a gallon and a half of water a day.
When the body knows that it's getting water, it's going to let it go. When you don't give it water, it's going to hold on to it.
I try to drink up to 3 gallons a day, so I spend a lot of time in the restroom. But water is a good pacifier when you're trying to suppress your appetite, and it's a very good cleanser to keep your skin clean. And also when you're training twice a day and laying in the sun in suntan beds, you're losing a lot of water, and the muscle needs water, and the system needs water to regulate the temperature throughout your system.
We've all heard a lot about nutritional supplements, but what exactly are nutritional supplements, and more importantly, what can they do for you in your program? Food scientists today have developed a vast array of nutritional supplements, ranging from anything from chewable vitamins to multi-mineral formulas, all the way to advanced formulas of amino acids, protein powders, carbohydrate drinks, and other nutrients. These nutrients play the part of key catalysts in the biochemical reactions that help your body produce energy. And athletes today are using these nutrients to help potentiate the total nutrient composition in their diet, and therefore help them meet the momentary nutritional needs of their body.
Bodybuilders today are using supplements to get 100% out of their workouts. In the past, they didn't train quite as hard as they do today. They didn't have the time. They didn't have. They didn't diet as strict. They didn't, have the time to do double split routines, supersets, trisets. In order to get 100% and to maintain assurance that they're getting 100% out of their workouts, they have to supplement. There's no assurance, even with a good diet, that you're going to get 100% of the vitamins and minerals you need for your body to function at a 100% peak efficiency. In order to do this, you have to supplement.
But you need to increase the vitamins purely because when you train, you lose them. You lose the minerals, you lose the vitamins faster. And because you're bodybuilding, you eat more protein. Protein, when you eat more protein, requires more minerals. Because protein loses, in proportion, minerals and vitamins, they go up together.
Vitamins are organic nutrients that act primarily in the body as coenzymes. That is, they assist enzymes in carrying out various metabolic functions. Vitamins fall into 2 basic categories: water-soluble and fat-soluble.
The first type of vitamin that we need to look at and understand are the water-soluble vitamins. Water-soluble vitamins are just that. They're soluble in water. That means that they're flushed from the body on a 24-hour basis, and they're very poorly stored. In fact, most of them aren't stored very well at all, if at all. 2 types of water-soluble vitamins we're most familiar with. The B family of vitamins, that's B1, B2, B3, B6, B12, and vitamin C. Well, what do these nutrients do? General rule of thumb, most of the B vitamins, or many of the B vitamins, are involved in nervous system function. Now that's important because when we train in the gym, we think of exercising our muscles and our tendons and our ligaments, but training intensely is an immensely neurologically taxing thing that we're putting on our body. It's taxing in the sense that we need optimum concentration. We need to have all our circuits firing for maximum fiber recruitment and have the most intense growth-producing workout that we can.
Always remember, bodybuilding is different than other people. Bodybuilders need more B6 than other people because B6 helps digest the food. and transported into the muscle.
Vitamin C we've heard a lot about, another water-soluble component. Vitamin C works as a basic ingredient or component of connective tissue. That's important because we're training under extreme, intense type conditions. You may have an injury or some soreness that can increase your utilization of vitamin C. It also works with the immune system function, specifically your white blood cells, and it also works as an antioxidant, which is important to break down potentially harmful or carcinogenic components that develop as natural byproducts in your body. So B vitamins and C vitamins, water-soluble, need to be taken in with your diet or your supplementation program on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K, are different than water-soluble in that fact that they're stored in your body, in the liver and the fat cells of your body. With water solubles, you don't really have to worry about them reaching toxic levels because they're expelled through your urine quite quickly. With fat solubles, you have to be careful because they are stored and they can reach toxic levels quite easily.
Vitamin A assists in the formation of healthy skin and hair, and it's necessary for the proper development of bones and muscle tissue. Vitamin E is an antioxidant and aids in the formation of red blood cells. Vitamin D helps with the absorption of calcium required for strong teeth and bones. Vitamin K helps to maintain normal bone metabolism. Minerals are inorganic nutrients that come in two forms. Macrominerals, which are needed in relatively large amounts, including calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, sulfur, sodium, and chloride. Trace or microminerals needed in only very small amounts include iron, zinc, selenium, manganese, molybdenum, copper, iodine, chromium, and fluorine.
You have to be careful to make sure you're getting enough minerals in your diet. Minerals will help regulate everything from muscle contraction, fluid balance. Say, for instance, sodium. If you're deficient in sodium, you'll have trouble contracting the muscle. You'll have problems with cramping from the muscle being depleted of some of its fluid. Calcium, magnesium, zinc all have to do with cramping of the muscle and fluid transfer of the muscle. You need minerals for proper nerve function. So it's very, very important to supplement your minerals along with your vitamins.
Protein powders offer you a cost-efficient, calorically efficient way to increase the total protein intake of your diet. And we know that protein, outside of water, is the most abundant element in our body. And it's important to have adequate protein to support muscle growth and tissue recuperation. Protein powders are convenient, they mix well, and they're usually very easy for the body to digest and absorb. They can act as a substitute in a meal, for instance. And they can have a complete protein, which is a combination of proteins and amino acids derived from foods, as well as having additional supplemental amino acids added to the formula. Protein powders, or amino acids, are the building blocks from which muscle tissue is constructed. Amino acid supplements are one step removed from protein powders in the sense that the amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, are supplied in their elemental or simple form. The benefit of this is that an amino acid supplement could be used in conjunction with a protein meal, as could a protein powder, for instance, to increase the essential amino acid ratio of the entire meal and thereby increase absorption and utilization.
Remember, supplements are just that. They're supplements. They're no substitute for a good, balanced, nutritious diet.
Now that you know how the champions eat to maintain mass, size, and power, put it to work for you. In the next lesson, you're going to learn all about the Weider principles, the principles that revolutionized bodybuilding and brought it into the modern age. You will know exactly every single technique that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, all the greats have used to develop their body.
To get the real fine cuts they have today, you have to go into a much stricter diet than we did.
I think that if the nutrition is not proper, you can train as hard as you want. Your training can be perfect, your recuperation can be perfect, but you'll go nowhere.
I think that nutrition is the most important thing about bodybuilding.
Bodybuilders have to stay on a diet all the time, throughout the year.
You might be able to build a big body without the right nutrition, but you never will be able to build a body like a champion bodybuilder without watching nutrition.